of anyone who wanted to be here today but was unable to make it, we will be sending out that direct link to this recorded session, and that will be available within the next 48 hours. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll go ahead and let Brian give you a little bit of intro about his background and jump right into the content. Brian?
Yeah, hold on one second, Crystal. There's a formatting issue that's not making this thing work properly, and so I gotta resave it, and then we'll be good to go.
Okay. If you need me,
I did this on my Mac, and then
not.
Let's see.
If you need me to bring it up, I do have a copy of it, so let me know if it's not working, and I'll just bring it up on my screen.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we're almost good to go. Okay. This the whole Mac to
PC conversion.
Microsoft conversion is not smooth yet, so this should work, and then we should be good to go. If it doesn't, then Crystal's going to go through it. So. All right, we're just going to go ahead and I'm going to just use it as a regular PowerPoint, and then we're good to go.
Okay. Apologies for the technical difficulties, everyone. Please stand by. We'll go ahead and get started.
Don't worry about it. I'll take it. Just you don't have to.
Do you have it?
No, I can pull it up on another way.
Okay.
PowerPoint again is not the funnest thing. So because GoToMeeting has these macros enabled, and it screws up your settings. Kind of like I'd have to restart it. I'm not going to do that. So.
Okay.
We're just gonna go ahead with this and then be done with it. All right. So if everybody can see that, we're gonna. I
can see it clearly.
We're gonna make this the presentation just so that there's problems with essentially. There's essentially problems with PowerPoint and the way this is formatting it. So it'll let me view it like this, but then won't let me do it the other way. So it is what it is, and we're just gonna. This was done on a Mac, and the conversions and all that kind of stuff doesn't necessarily work out. But we'll get the general gist of things. And again, the most important thing is the content, the slides, and a lot of people who do. And Crystal, you're recording this, by the way.
Yes.
So, and a lot of times when these kind of things happen, they focus on the slides, and the slides are not necessarily the most important thing. The content is the most important thing. So what we want to do is give you guys, kind of great content, really give you some action items, and really enable you to be better appraisers. I mean, everyone, again, from the AMC's perspective, we see so many appraisals, and we see so much, all across the nation from all types of appraisers, and it's something where, the reason we're doing these is because there's a lot of little things. It's not big things. It's not like you're missing the boat. It's just little things that we see that could be addressed that would make not only the industries better as a whole, which is one of our goals, but also, and help you guys make more money, improve the profession, and just overall straighten things out. And so it's really kind of a two-part goal. Is one to help the industry, one to help you guys, and then also just let everyone get better. There's no point of us sharing, hiding all this information. We don't need a competitive advantage that way. So let's go ahead and get started, and then we're just going to go slide by slide. It's not going to be as sexy as it would be if I can pull these things up as point, but it's going to be good enough, and it's definitely the content is the most important thing. So valuing really complex properties doing real or complex properties go against the trends in the mortgage industry. A loan closed to them is considered a liability, and as such, they ensure their risk is, they want to limit their risk as much as possible. Lenders want to make loans in predictable properties and predictable areas that meet standards. And again, this is what the United States of America looks like. So, regardless of where you are, this is a map everyone follows. In the lending community, the map looks a little more like this. And this is a map based on population. So essentially, when you look at this, the states aren't always the same size. There's certain areas that are significantly larger and less just based solely on population. So Los Angeles, everyone in California is a large state. Los Angeles is one of the biggest. New York is one of the biggest. Houston, Atlanta, Miami, all those types of things. So when you look at the most probable, and this is where it's something where they're not looking necessarily when they write their guidelines. They're looking for the most probable. So 99 out of 100 are going to be somewhere in these kind of geographical areas that meet kind of the standard guidelines. Like if you look at Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C. is 11 by 11 miles. So you're talking about something, if you were in good shape, you could jog across it in the morning. And I know people who do that every morning. And it's a fairly large area because there's a lot of people here. So it's something where, Kansas is great, not that many people there. So they're going to write loans and guidelines to areas that have the most. Because why? They want to serve the most people. It's something where, again, it's not going to meet everybody. Everyone's not going to be included, but it's something where they can serve the most people. It makes sense that way to write their guidelines in a way and in a manner that serves the most. So this is kind of how the United States looks from a lender's perspective. So these are kind of written to geographical areas. Again, the loan guidelines are written based on population. Lenders look from a macro perspective. They're not looking city by city. They're not looking county by county. They're not looking zip code by zip code. They're going to say, out of, if I had to write 100,000 loans, out of 100,000, what would the most probable loan be? The goal is to build consistency. It also builds liquidity, because essentially, if you're going to buy a loan pool, or if you're going to buy these as an investment, you got to realize that a mortgage is an investment to somebody. So if you're going to buy a loan pool, or if you're going to buy a mortgage from somebody, you want to make sure that they all are consistent. You want to make sure that everything's with consistent guidelines and everything of that nature. So they're not necessarily going to serve everybody. McDonald's doesn't offer everything for everybody, but they're going to serve the masses. So by serving the masses, they've got to exclude some people. If they want to cater to everyone, they won't be able to serve the masses. Typical home characteristics. So it just kind of gives you, this is from the Census Bureau. It gives you some data where it's, this is based to give the best information they had, and I kind of use this as an idea. So this is what lenders look like. So they look at national statistics. They look at regional statistics. So, if you've got a one-bedroom house that you're appraising, only 3% of the population has a one-bedroom home. That includes condos. So, again, this is just 3%. 21% are two-bedroom, 49% are three, 20% are more, or 20% are four-bedroom, and 4.4 have 5 bedrooms or more. So if you were going to make a loan, what's the lowest risk? 3 bedrooms. 2 bedrooms are a little higher risk. 4 bedrooms are about the same as 2. 5 bedrooms, again, there's less of a market. In 1 bedrooms, there's the least amount of market. So from a risk perspective, okay, 3 bedrooms homes are the most common and would probably carry the least risk in the idea that you can sell them easily. They're going to conform to general guidelines. So when you have a 1-bedroom house or you have a 2-bedroom house, there's a reason that they give you a whole bunch of stuff about it. It's because of this specific types of things where they just want to make sure that they're covering their butt. And they're more meeting guidelines. Same thing if you go to heating. So if you have a house that has, let's say, solar heat, or less than 1%, less than a percentage point, has solar heat. If you have one that has wood heat, that's not a common. They want to go for the common. They're going to look for the 30% to 40%. Anything that, again, this is what they use to write their guidelines. They're saying, here's the typical house. Here's the typical one. Anything that's not within this kind of framework, we're going to have potential problems with. Typical home characteristics. So the average, in my immediate response as an appraiser is, this house isn't 2,700 square feet. That's my immediate kind of situation, but again, that's not the point. So the typical home is, $273,000. It's 2,700 square feet. It has a 14,000 lot size, 14,000 square foot lot, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, heated by gas. So that's typical. So that's, and what I'm saying is it's predominant too. So out of 100 homes, maybe 90 of them, single-family homes, will fit this category to a certain extent within a certain variance. So if you were a lender and you were going to make loans, you want to make sure that most of your loans meet these guidelines and are generally meeting these kind of things. It's not something that they want to deviate so much because, again, this is a liability to them. They're willing, like I would say, if you had $300,000 to lend and you were going to lend $300,000 out to somebody, would you want, this very consistent house that meets the national standards and the local standards, or would you want some like one-off farm that is way kind of very odd? Now again, not necessarily fair, but I say when you get your own world, you can write your own lender guidelines. But this is just kind of the way it is. They're trying to build consistency in the marketplace, and they're trying to create liquidity for lenders and banks. So they have to have some type of guidelines. Okay, so here's some examples of some not typical. So here's a house that we did an appraisal on. Again, the PowerPoint slide is going to make it look a little weird, but it should have been popping up. Here's another house. This is actually kind of a bio home, which is pretty cool. Here's a house that is built. It has a library inside. So essentially, this is what the inside of the house looks like totally. So this is in 100% books. Like literally the entire thing is books. This is a condo that is just the weirdest looking thing. It's a sliced bread. Again, these are all residential properties. People are living there. This is a fairly large building that, again, there's very Art Deco kind of eclectic looking. This is another one. Again, very odd looking, very strange looking. But again, there's not conforming. So how are you going to do an appraisal on these things? Here's another kind of a cool resort looking one. In the side of a mountain. Again, these are all, somebody has a loan on these things. Somebody did an appraisal. This is a joke one, but this was done by a builder to kind of represent the mortgage industry. Upside down house. Now that's an actual functional house too. Everything's upside down. It was built by a builder kind of as a joke. Took a long time to construct, and it's just kind of humorous. Again, this is something where you're driving up to the property, and I remember doing this many times, and you look at this thing, oh crap. And usually, like they say, is if you're driving down the street and you see like the most oddest house, and you think, I'd hate to appraise that one. That's the house you're appraising. So just FYI, that's just, it always is that way. So again, this gives you a perfect example. He obviously didn't get a loan on this. You probably wouldn't be able to get a loan on this. And some of these you wouldn't be able to get loans on. Just kind of an FYI. Some of these things, this one, you might be able to if it was like a specialty bank. But generally speaking, you're not going to be able to get a loan on something like this from Fannie Mae. Portfolio lender might be able to do it, but they might not do it. But generally speaking, you're not going to get it. The idea, with these pictures, is kind of humorous, but at the same time, in all sincerity, these go outside of your typical home. So what are you going to do? I mean, obviously, there's a report that has to be done. Obviously, there's a property that has to be appraised, and they're going to have to be financing somewhere. But it's something where, reality of the situation is that it's not as easy as most underwriters think and most lenders think, and it's something where, as an appraiser, you've got to really focus on trying to solve the best issue. And we're going to kind of go into that a little bit. Okay, having guidelines will allow 90% of homes to be eligible for financing relatively easily. Case by case, some will be ineligible, and that's something appraisers, need to understand is that, not all properties will be appraisable from a lender's perspective. We're going to go into that too. Unless a bank is going to portfolio loan, it will have to meet the GSE or HUD guidelines, and even most banks securitize their portfolio. And if, for people who understand that, so banks make loans. Somebody who is a federally chartered bank or a state bank can make a loan and put it in their portfolio, which essentially means they're not going to sell it to anybody, so they can do anything they want, to a certain extent. So they can, if you had $2 million at a bank and you needed a loan for $300,000 for their house, they wouldn't have you fill out all the applications and all that kind of stuff. You would just go to the bank and they would basically just give you the money and say, because of the relationship with you, you don't need to approve for a loan. You don't need to follow the GSE guidelines. You don't need to do all this other stuff. There's still some disclosures and some other things that need to happen. But generally speaking, they can they have a lot of leeway. So they could use a BPL. They don't have to get a full appraisal. So there's a lot of other stuff they can do. Most banks who portfolio loan, it helps with their deposit, it helps with their capital reserve ratios, still securitize. And securitize means essentially they're going to write it to GSE or HUD guidelines. GSE or HUD guidelines are essentially going to make sure that this appraisal falls within the acceptable property standards. So essentially they're going to make sure that comps are within a certain distance, properties are, comps are within a certain distance, within a certain time frame, within a certain acceptable adjustment ratio, all those things. So most banks will still, even if they plan on portfolioing it, will still securitize and follow HUD guidelines because of the fact that they don't want to be stuck with a loan that's not saleable in case they need to sell it. Going back, there's no way around the guidelines. Essentially what HUD does and what FHA does is, HUD is FHA, what the GSEs do, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they tell a lender or a bank, here's what we want as the end product, okay? We don't care how you necessarily get there, but this is what we want. So they want an appraisal that meets these guidelines, that meets these specific criteria. We don't care how you get to that point. So they're not getting down to the details of the day-to-day business. But here's what you need to provide us. Okay? So it becomes, most people don't understand that they're not necessarily doing everything they say. So, for instance, distance between well and septic. Okay? The appraiser is not required to necessarily do that. Or is city water sewer available for FHA? The appraiser is not necessarily required to do that. But the lender is required to have that information on the file. So it just makes sense to have the appraiser do it because he's trained to do it. And he can get the information available. So the FHA doesn't really care how you get it as long as it's there. So a lot of these things is like when you look at these appraisals, if you were a lender, would you lend outside of conforming or conventional so you can so you couldn't securitize and be stuck with one, or would you securitize? I would try to securitize. The problem is that you get these odd properties, and essentially what happens is they try to securitize it, and then Fannie Mae says, no, we're not buying it, and then they're stuck with the loan, and that's what they don't want to do. So this whole, they're unrealistic about comps, they're unrealistic about that, it's because they're trying to cover their ass. And it's something where they just don't want to be stuck with this loan. And again, there's two problems. This is where it becomes back to there's appraisal problems and there's underwriting problems. And they aren't always connected, nor is the second always solvable. Where there's, okay, here's the problem with the appraisal. And I used to get this all the time. Okay, there's a problem with the appraisal. Okay, what's the problem? Well, the underwriter doesn't like it. Okay, well, why don't they like it? Well, your adjustments are too high and your comps are this and this and this. In reality, there's no problem with the appraisal. There's a problem with the underwriting because they're not comfortable in closing the loan, funding it, and then they think they're not going to be able to sell it. So there's two separate things, and appraisers need to realize that, there's about, on every appraisal you do, there's about 5 or 6 people who are going to look at this appraisal and make a decision if they're going to buy it or not. And if they don't buy it, somebody's going to be stuck with this thing. So when you do an appraisal on a property and it's an odd property, they're going to look at this thing with a fine-tooth comb because they don't want to be stuck with this thing. And again, there's specific financial reasons they don't want to be stuck with it, and some of them won't sell it. And, you know, we could go on to that for days. But essentially, you got to realize where they're coming from when you get these odd properties. Rural properties. So generally speaking, from what we've seen, this is not, you know, this is not based on philosophy. This is not based on, you know, this is not based on theory. This is specific experience that we have, as well as my personal experience. Proximity can be explained, adjustments, excessive adjustments can't. If you've got a property and you're going to go 10 miles versus 30 miles, as long as the comps are better, you can explain away to 30 miles. You can't explain bad comps. Comps with similar overall use and market appeal are the biggest factor. You want to limit to one factor, and this is where it comes back to consistency. So the idea with a lot of these things, like when you're doing rural properties or you're trying to meet the guidelines, there's accepted, like they have a kind of terms, you know, denied, right, which means essentially the file's denied. They have acceptable with conditions, which means that you didn't really meet the guidelines, but we accepted it and we conditioned it, and it's okay. And then they have acceptable. Well, essentially, what you want to do is to a certain extent, it's kind of a judgment call when it comes to the appraisal. And if you limit it to one factor, and this is where it comes back to just kind of you get a feel for it from experience, it enables a smoother process. So if, for instance, you've got, I think I have an example right after this, right? Yeah, so here's an example. So you've got, look at this appraisal. So this is a property in Kansas that, you look at this, and so you've got, you know, comps 18, 25, 60 miles. You've got comps over a year old. This was just done fairly recently. This property is on 68 acres, you know, 104 acres, 40 acres, 100 acres, which isn't that bad a difference. 108 years old, you know, then you've got 131 years old. Square footage relatively okay. And then you've got, you know, a whole bunch of adjustments here, right? So you're already at, and let's say on the high side, you're at 60 miles. There's another comp that was 80 miles away. Well, you're at 60 miles. Okay. So then there's 20 miles here, and then you got 260 to 160 and 235. So there's no way they're, you know, adjustments are at 80%. All of that. There's no way they're approving this law. Okay, there's just no way. I mean, instantaneously, it doesn't matter. They're not going to do this, right? And the reason is why? Because there's too many things that are wrong with this. So you just don't have the distance. You have the age. You just don't have the age. You've got the different age of the comparables. You've got the age of the actual home. Then you just don't have that. You've got these super large adjustments for these outbuildings. Then you've got the acreage difference. And then you've got this like thousands of things. And then what happens, the underwriters are going to say, there's a new way, we're not approving this thing. There's just no way, right? Now, a bank, if the loan-to-value, if you went to like a local bank and the loan-to-value ratio was real low, let's say they own like $30,000 and they just wanted to own 100, you know, they just wanted to borrow $40,000, they might just do that just because they know it's relatively a safe investment and it's a local community bank and they know the area and all these types of things. So that's okay. But when you look at it from like a conforming perspective, there's no way they're going to do that. And so what would be kind of the, you know, the proper way? And I wish I had like, okay, you know, the right appraisal to do this. This just ended up getting denied. But essentially, you need to eliminate factors. And the way I want to best say this is you need, you know, if the difference between going, let's say, a year or a year and a half, and the difference between going, let's say, you know, 10 miles on all three comps versus 50 miles on all three comps, or 30 miles with this particular property in this particular situation wouldn't have made a difference. Meaning, if he took the time to find comparables that were all, let's say, 100 years old, and let's say they were, you know, on, let's say, 20 acres or more, because they have a residential use that's similar. Let's say they were all kind of similar, and then you could just deal with, again, the age of the comparables and the distance. They'd have probably approved the loan. or you can just deal with necessarily the size of the comparables, or you can just deal with one factor that they can isolate. With this kind of thing, and again, it's to the appraiser's discredit, because there's probably a lot of comparables on these things that would have made the loan work and would have made the borrower be able to get financing because it just looks cleaner. And then presentation is a factor. Again, this is a professional, so this is the big boys talk. Presentation is a factor. So, comps are all over the place, values all over the place. The value might not change, but the way you present the information is definitely a factor. And this just gives you an example of, okay, this is not going to fly. There's other comparables that could have been used that would have made this work. And it's something where, to the discredit of the appraisal, it just is what it is. Without some type of consistency, you have nothing. Again, you're painting a picture. Sometimes not including additional comps is better than jugging it up. And then we see that where, and I get a better example later on, where you've got a comp at 200,000, 200,000, 600,000, and it's like, well, why is that comp in 600,000? And it's like, well, blah 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 blah. And the reality of the situation is what? Find an older comp. Go further and get rid of the $600,000 comp that the value is only 210 in the beginning, so it really doesn't matter. You want to get it down to a factor. You want to kind of isolate the issue and get it down to one factor. Now, odd properties. Okay, so again, we're just going to kind of broad brush and we're going to have some questions. But odd properties. Similar use is a factor. So you use some odd properties, contemporaries, and I got to give an example, some contemporaries. Functionality and similar market appeal will take you further than anything else. Common sense approach works better than you think. And then you definitely want to look at things from a different angle. If you explain things the right way, underwriters aren't stupid. They can kind of look at things from a different perspective. But it's just, you got to kind of say, and then this comes back to the same kind of question you always ask yourself is, if I was a borrower, I was going to buy this house. What other houses, what other neighborhoods, what other ways where I would approach it? And then with that, you got to put your lender guy hat on. What would I want to know? What would I want to see on an appraisal report that would make me feel confident and you got to give them the warm and fuzzies. What would give me the warm and fuzzies? And that's where you've got to present it. There's a big difference between, me, you come over to my house and me cooking you a steak dinner and handing it to you in a nice presentation versus me cooking you a steak dinner and smacking it in your face. Same steak dinner, so same result, same value, same thing, different presentation. I was doing, one of my buddies is a local appraiser in the area, and he kept having all these problems because he'd get all the realtors who were complaining about the values not coming in for purchases, right? So this is back in the day. So values don't come in, that's just going to happen, right? Well, one of the issues is that he was just sending over the appraisal, emailing it to him, value didn't come in for the purchase, and just being over with and done with it, and then, waiting to get this call back, with his realtor who's in a fit about the appraisal and how he sucks and how he's stupid and this and this and that, right? Well, I told him, I said, one of the issues is the way you're presenting it, meaning what you should do is, if you know the value's not coming in, that's not going to change anything. Call the realtor, and this is when you could talk to the realtors, and tell them this, or call the loan officer and tell them this and explain and ask for feedback. And then when they can't give you anything that supports the value, then you're the hero because you're trying to work with them and all that kind of stuff. And again, either way, the value is the value. Either way, the value is the value with all these, but the presentation makes the biggest difference. Now, that one thing you see is basically whole business. Little salesmanship, presentation. Now, this isn't going to come up the right way, but we're going to kind of, I'm going to show you this. So this is a property in D.C., and these are numbered, but the format's weird because essentially this PowerPoint presentation isn't working properly. But I'm going to go ahead and go through this. So if you guys aren't familiar with D.C., some of you guys who appraise in rural properties, you're going to just grab your pants when you see this thing because this is just so. This is a carriage house. So this is in Washington, D.C., in a really good area. So let's just try to get this so that you can see. Okay. So here's the front of this house. Oh, here's the back of this house, right? All right, so then again, you look at this thing and you're like, what is this worth, like $50,000? Now, this thing's worth like $800,000. So I know for people in the other states, you're just, no way, right? So this is an appraisal. This thing's under contract for $800,000. It was on the market for, again, this is D.C. This is not, other areas, but these things are worth a tremendous amount per square foot. So this is zero bedroom system efficiency. It's a carriage house. So essentially, when D.C. wasn't as populated, and people were on kind of horse and buggy, they had carriage houses for the horses to live. Those got separately deeded a lot of times and then sold later on when carriages were obviously not popular. And then some people converted them to living space. It's actually kind of cool little nifty loft things. But this one is for sale and under contract. So look at this appraisal, right? So you're looking at this thing and you're thinking, well, there's obviously a big difference in value, and there's obviously a lot of inconsistencies. The appraiser who did this property was not qualified to do this appraisal. This is actually pretty complex when it comes to DC because you're dealing with a lot of zoning issues and things like that. But essentially, it was approached very wrong. Now, comp 1, not that great. Comp 2, oh, not that great. Comp 3, not that great. So you're dealing with kind of a triple whammy, not that great. There are good comps available, which, again, it comes back to consistency and just getting it down to one factor. What he tried to do is find somewhat okay comps and then explain all the adjustments, explain all these things, instead of, and if you go back to the map, instead of going further, he could have pretty much gone as far as he wanted to go. And he could have probably used the entire District of Columbia to find comparable sales and explain the distance and adjust for the neighborhoods, because there are, if you go down the Foggy Bottom and some other areas down here where my mouse is, there's a lot of carriage houses. There's a tremendous amount of carriage houses. But what he decided to do is stay closer but not use the best comparables. We had to redo this appraisal. But this just gives you an example. So if you look at the comps, so here's what the, and again, you guys, $800,000, right? Here's what the front of the house looks like, right? So you're just thinking, no way. This isn't a real, the lot is worth $500,000, $600,000. So this is the front of the house. Here's his comps that he used from a photo standpoint, and I'm just going to kind of give you these things. So he used kind of traditional houses. Now you look at this one. This is actually not bad. This was a sale he had on for comp 4 for $800,000 of a carriage house that was also converted. You can see right here, this is where they used to pull the horses in. And this is also a carriage house for $550,000 in a different neighborhood. But you can see this sold a little different area, but again, DC is a little different. But then he tried to use traditional homes. There are plenty of carriage houses. If he went further, right, what he'd have done is eliminated some factors. Okay, so he'd eliminated the inconsistency with the comparables not being similar. Now, again, comps 2 and 4 are similar, but the other ones really aren't that great. And so if he just went a little further, let's say he went another 4 or 5 miles, or if he just used all of DC and just said, look, I'm trying to find the most similar comparable sales, and then he can explain the neighborhoods. You can use tax assessments for the neighborhoods and explain the difference in the neighborhoods. You can use land assessed values and come up with the difference. And so he's just limiting it to one factor, and that's one of the most important things is limiting things to just kind of just one factor, where if you can say, all right, if you can get to the point where you're not confusing people with all these other things. So again, to the appraiser, this may make sense. This appraisal may make sense to the appraiser. To an underwriter looking at this thing, they have no idea about DC. They're not in this area. They have no idea about the carriage houses and the history of that and how much, and they're kind of cool to live in and people like them. They don't know anything about that kind of stuff. So by having this kind of junked up, you kind of make it too much and they kind of get confused. If he just found all carriage houses, or if he just had 4 comparables, 3 carriage houses sales and 1 listing, and that's it, and didn't get these other houses involved, it would have made a significant difference in the loan. Again, not as easy as it sounds. Sounds a lot easier than it really is, but you want to kind of look at from a consistency standpoint of painting the picture. Your idea is to paint a picture. You can explain 1 or 2 factors. When you start to, let's say, just stay close. So I want to find comparables within a mile. I want to find comparables with this kind of thing. It becomes much more difficult because you're trying to make it fit into a box. And again, you're appraising on a property, so it's not going to fit into this box. Generally speaking, so again, in wrapping up because we got to end pretty soon. Generally speaking, when you try to do everything, you really do nothing. The most similar comparables are best regardless of distance and age, generally speaking. Sometimes more or less when it comes to comparables. Don't throw in comps to add consistency. Okay? And then they would use this kind of picture. And when you get, my father taught me how to appraise. He always says, appraising is like painting a picture. So you want to paint a landscape. So you want to paint consistency. You want it so that they understand, so that the reader understands this report. And when you look at it that way, you want to say, okay, well, is this property, or is this appraisal painting a picture? You got this beautiful landscape. This is a very famous Turkish landscape. So you put this beautiful landscape. So you've got comps at 200, you've got comps at 220, you've got comps at 270, or no, 220, 210, and let's say you come in at 205. So you got this beautiful painting. Now again, there's going to be some problems. There's going to be, one of them's a little older, one of them's a little, one of them's a little not that similar, one of them's a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, but you're kind of, you've painted a relative picture. So a lot of the appraisals we see look like this. So they're got this beautiful picture, and then they put something in like this, and I actually put this in there, and this is just kind of a joke, where they put some extra comp in there. They put some high value comps. You've got 200, 200, 680, 200, 210, 230, 470. And the thing is it takes this beautiful picture and it kind of puts an eye, and there's something where you get a totally, this is the same picture. So I just added this little UFO thing and some laser beams. And you take this beautiful picture and you kind of distort it. And everyone, focuses on the laser beams, all right? And everyone focuses on and everyone thinks it's like under attack, and the cage down there is really some kind of punishment. So it's a whole perspective change. It's just for one factor. So when you look at an appraisal, you can have 6 comps and all great. You put 1 comp in there that's inconsistent with the area on an odd property, and you put it in there because of whatever. Guess what? They're not reading this whole thing. I mean, they are, but it doesn't necessarily make. They're going to look at the comps more so than anything else, and it just doesn't make sense. And that's the biggest issue we see with these odd properties and these rural properties, is that the appraisers do a great job of painting a good picture, and then they put one thing in there that necessarily shouldn't have been in there, or they add stuff that shouldn't be, or they overdo it and confuse everybody. Because regardless of how beautiful this landscape is and how much the other picture, all these kind of things, you're focusing on the freaking UFO. And it's something where the consistencies make us, and those little things make a significant difference. You've got to eliminate factors to where it's just, anyone's got to have this like Zen appraisal report, where it just flows and it's consistent and it makes sense and it's well done and all these kind of things. And again, that takes time to learn how to do that, but it comes with starting to eliminate things, eliminate some of the addendums, eliminate some of the excessive comparables that really shouldn't be there. And like one of the things I used to do when I was always writing an appraisal So I use a company called Data Masters to import all the information. So I put 14 comps in the appraisal, and then I would get it down to 5 or 6. So I start off with this tremendous amount of data, which again, if you send an appraisal with an underwriter to 14 comps, it's just going to confuse them. So I would put 14 comps in there and then get it down to just the core, so just what I really needed. And almost none of the appraisals got condition. Because why? Because you put all the information in and then you pull out just what's needed, just the essential data. And it's something where these, especially with the rural and complex properties, a lot of appraisers just overdo it. And they have this beautiful landscape, and then they put their freaking UFO in there, and it confuses everybody. Because again, no matter what, no matter how you talk to the appraiser, and he says, well, I put this in there, and I put this comment in there, and I put this comment, and I put 9 comps, and yeah, that's a problem. You got to take 3 of those comps out. You got to take these comments out, and it's a very good appraisal as is, and you don't have to junk it up, and you're good to go. Again, not necessarily gospel, just my personal philosophy. Some information about us, you can find us on the web, and then we're going to kind of open it up for Q&A. I know we're going to have a lot of questions, but we've got about 5 or 10 minutes for Q&A. This went over some technical difficulties, so Chris will just do like 3 or 4 questions, and then you can email webinars@coesterappraisals.com for other questions if we can't get you, because again, there's like 600 people on this webinar, so there's no way we're going to be able to get to all the questions. So, Crystal, do you have any questions?
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Brian, for that presentation. I appreciate it. We're just going to start with one here presented by Helen. I think you might have confirmed it earlier in your presentation. However, Helen would like to know the source of the information on the slide entitled Typical Home Characteristics Data. I think you mentioned it was the U.S. Census, but I just wanted to get a confirmation.
And then I got it from other sources. So essentially, literally Googled, average home value in 2000, average median home price in 2010. And I think that was from realtor.org, and then the average price, I think was from like the Builders Association. So the Census Bureau has some of the information, and some of the information is from there, but everything's online, and it's either from, and I would say either realtor.org, the Builders Association, and some of it's from city data, and some of it's from it was from other like FHA websites. But generally speaking,
okay?
It's all online. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, great. And Rita also mentioned a good point. She was stating about the example you used in Northwest D.C. She said typically in urban areas, you know how you mentioned to go further out for more comparables, but typically in urban areas, the expansion for the search for comps isn't really as high as it would be in, let's say, a more rural area. Can you address how they would go about fixing that? If they are in an urban area and comps are just all over the place?
Yeah, I mean, what you want to do is, again, you want to get down to as small as factors as possible. So, like in an urban area, you could go a half a mile and have 5,000 properties to choose from, versus in a rural area, you go half a mile, you have 1 or something, none. So. It's to a certain extent you got to depend on the market area. Like I'm just going to use DC because we use DC. DC is very complex to appraise. So you got zoning, you've got commercial. So going a mile might not make a big difference if it's all commercial for that mile. Going 2 miles might not make a big difference if it's all commercial for that 2 miles. So you just got to go where the niches are. I know in New York it's kind of like that, where there's niches and there's a financial district where really nobody lives. So, okay, you got to go further. So if you've got a property that's located, let's say, on the east side, and, it's just kind of odd property, well, you might have to go all the way to the west side, which is, let's say, 3-4 miles. Well, that's not necessarily a big deal, but you're just going to try to find the best comparables. With the Northwest D.C. property, the issue is that there's other areas, and D.C. is pretty nice kind of all around. There's other areas that he could have gone to find comparables if he kind of just expanded. I think a lot of appraisers say, okay, well, here are the guidelines. Again, these are guidelines. It's not 100%. You got to generally meet them, but the most important thing is to instill confidence and to instill confidence in the reader that you're painting an accurate picture. Staying closer using comparables that really aren't the best isn't painting an accurate picture. That's just kind of trying to make it fit when it really doesn't. But at the same time, you know, there's no right answer too. So I mean, that's at the same time, you don't want to go too outside the guidelines either.
Okay, great. And Anthony would like to know if you could just touch really quickly on green appraisals, because apparently FHA recently approved a EEM mortgage, and he also piggybacks on that by saying, or asking, I'm sorry, if a green appraisal is considered complex.
Yeah, that is something I'm actually, he's talking about the energy efficient mortgage initiative, kind of, that is something that's very interesting that I'm actually really getting involved in. It is complex, and it's something where there's not clear guidelines. There's going to need to be more information available to the appraiser to kind of make comments on it. I mean, like one of the things, and I'm doing a panel for, I don't remember the name of the thing yet, but this green kind of thing in Philadelphia, which we're talking about, you know, how you bring in the valuation. So, you know, we're thinking one of the things is utilities. So if you knew, you know, 12 months of utilities, so if this property is a green property, it's only, let's say, $100 for 12 months versus another property, it's like $3,000 for 12 months. Well, if the average homeowner is going to keep their home for 4 years, you can come up with a reasonable value based on that and tangible adjustments based on that. Energy efficiency is going to make a difference. So it's going to be significant. And it is a factor because utilities are a factor. I think the secondary market's going to have to pick it up first. I think the appraisers who are making significant adjustments for energy efficiency are a little bit above, and I think ahead of the curve, and it's something where there's going to have to be more information available because it is very easy. If they give you the utility bills for a year and you ask the homeowner for the utility bills for a year, which they have that information, so every property, every home that gets a contract now, you got to disclose your utility bills for the year. So they just put that in the MLS. You could very easily say, you know, come up with a difference, and if there was some type of green certification for homes, that would make a difference if they came up with something like that. And again, you're right on the edge because it's something where in 6 months or a year, it's going to make a significant. It's probably a year. It's going to make a significant difference. But right now, they don't have enough information. You don't have enough information on the comparables. You don't have enough information on. You know, especially if it's a modified. If it was built that way, you might have other ones that were built that way. But if it's a modified one, you don't have information on the comparables, and you're kind of stuck where without tangible information, you can't really, it's very hard to adjust. I mean, how are you going to adjust for something where you don't know the other comparables? And then you can't really believe the realtors either on the MLS because they say every house is, you know, has a tankless hot water heater, and oh, it's a super green. It's really not. Whereas there are some properties that are really built green. And green in the idea that it's saving you money, not in green the idea that it's using, I mean, from an appraiser's perspective, you know, if they're using regular concrete versus green concrete, and, you know, it's just more eco-friendly, but doesn't make a difference in, you know, let's say utility bills or anything tangible, then, you know, as an appraiser, I mean, you really can't, it's not really your concern. But if it's solar energy that can lower the bills, if it's some environmental snob appeal, but still to be determined. Okay, and let's just take one more question, Crystal. I gotta jump
sure. Before I jump into this, can you go ahead and edit the email address? I see there's a little typo in the Coester Appraisals spelling. I think typing a little fast, but I just wanted to make sure that was correct just in case.
Okay, yeah,
the TER, there's an extra TER if you can take that off.
Yep, there it is. All right.
One more. There you go. Okay, perfect. And the last question comes from Amanda. She asks, how do you address excessively large pole barns and storage buildings when comparable sales have significantly smaller or no storage buildings at all?
Yeah, so that's something where depends on your area, but it's something where did they add any additional residential? So you're appraising a property for residential usage. So if you're appraising a property as a farm, okay, so they mean a big difference. So if you're appraising a property for somebody to live there, what is the residential use? Not commercial use, not, okay, horses, yeah, that's great, not, but if they have a 2,000 square foot barn that can hold 700 horses and 6 tractors and all this kind of stuff, that's not a residential use, that's a commercial use. And so you put in the report, yeah, it has all these buildings, but it doesn't add any value. It's considered like excessive, it's overbuilt. It's overbuilt for the area, it's overbuilt for the residential use. Again, 2 different uses. So you're appraising what? A property for lending purposes. And somebody was going to buy it for to run a horse, it would add a tremendous amount of value. When it's somebody adding it for just residential use, doesn't make that big a difference. Ideally, you would have comparables that have similar barns and similar functionality. But what I would do is, like, we run into this a lot with a lot of custom homes where, okay, so this property has 7 porches. This is a $3 million property in Potomac, Maryland. So this property has 7 porches, a 17-car garage, and a pool, and a this and a this. And so some of the things that they have, let's say the porches, well, those are built because of a particular architecture style, not necessarily because they add value. So they might have like a southern plantation front. So the porches are going to make what? This will take a significant portion. They're very large. So some appraisers would, value on like a per square foot basis. But not all the homes are going to be just like that. So some of the homes are going to be built more of a, let's say, a traditional colonial style. So the porches aren't going to be applicable because they don't fit the architectural style. So you would say, all homes are, I would give just kind of a quality rating to the amenities, where the quality rating of the amenities are considered, let's say considered adequate, or considered, similar, regardless of what they have. Where you can't make adjustments for retaining walls and pools and barns and patios and pools and all that kind of stuff, because each home, especially when you get to the more unique homes, especially when you get to the customized homes, it's going to be built to the homeowner's satisfaction, and the little details of, well, this one has a pool, and then there's a retaining wall that backs the pool, which is kind of nice, and then there's a patio that fits. Well, the other one might not need that. The other one might not need a retaining wall. The other one might not necessarily, the other one has an indoor pool. And so it's like, what's the difference between an indoor pool and an outdoor pool? And it becomes one of those things where there's so many factors, there's almost no factors, because what, they're all similar, they all appeal to a similar buyer profile, they all appeal to a similar overall functional use, they all appeal to a, they all meet the architectural kind of standards of the property that was built, and they're all unique. Yeah, they're all unique. So you can't compare, you can't over-adjust. You know what I mean? Like I always say, it's at a certain point, what's the difference between a 10,000 square foot house and a 15,000 square foot house? And it's like, well, 5,000 square feet, but it's kind of floor space. You're not really getting any additional usage out of the 5,000 square feet. It's a lot of floor space. As long as they're built with similar construction, it's pretty much the same thing. And to a certain extent, a homeowner really would know this difference. I mean, you're talking about, an extra 5 feet on the back, which is not, 5 feet on the back, 10 feet width, and you've got 3,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet on each level, and you've got an extra 5,000 square feet. Most people wouldn't be able to notice that by looking at the house unless you measured it. Most people wouldn't be able to notice that by looking at it, and so it's just a similar use. And I would, some appraisers are too analytical to do that, where they value every nail, and some of them kind of get, where they're just looking at it from a macro perspective. And just one more question, Crystal, and then we got to go because I got a conference call to jump on at 5.
No, that's fine. I think you did a great job. Thank you so much, and hopefully all of our attendees took something away with them that they could use in the future. Hopefully this is very helpful. Once again, this link will be available within the next 48 hours to this webinar, so please inform anyone you know who wasn't able to be here today to please look out for that in the email. So, Brian, any last words?
Yep. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone, and have a great week.
Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
The organizer has